Hi, welcome to Carolyn Braden's Turning the Ordinary into the Extraordinary. Today, my husband and I are going to paint this cedar chest. This chest belonged to my great-grandmother. It's been in the family for years. Some people might be like, why are you gonna paint that, Carolyn, if it's a family heirloom? It's because it's very scratched up, so I had two choices. I could either refinish it back to its original wood, or I could try painting it. And I really am liking the look of painted furniture right now, especially white with a little bit of gold leafing on it. And I know if I don't end up liking it, I can always refinish it back to its original state. Tommy here has painted cabinets before with chalk paint, and that is what we are going to use today. We are going to use, which kind?
Behr chalk decorative paint in white.
When we painted our kitchen cabinets, we used Sloan, which was a great paint, but today we just wanted to change it up and try something different. And you read the reviews and you saw that the reviews were really good.
It said to have a little bit better reviews than the Sloan did, so we thought we would try it. It's such a smaller piece of furniture, and it doesn't necessarily need to be quite as durable because it's not getting used as much. So give it a try.
Okay, here are the items you need for your project.
This is a round natural hair bristle brush we bought in a set on Amazon. This is what a lot of the people that when we looked up chalk paint they recommend using. So we will try that.
Here it is up close. That's the brush we're using. And you need gloves to keep your hands from getting chemicals all over them. You need a mask. This is just a standard mask since I'm filming this during the COVID pandemic. Masks are really hard to come by. So we had these from when Tommy was sick a while ago, so this will definitely help with some of the fumes, but I'm also doing this in an area that's well ventilated, and I can also open up the windows if it gets too stinky in here. What else do we need? You need a wet rag. Why?
Just to clean off any dust or dirt that's on it before we start. This thing hasn't ever probably been waxed or anything, so that's probably not a concern, but just clean off any dirt, dust, or oils. You
will also need a sanding brick. What kind of grit do you think is on this?
Probably just a medium or a fine grit, just if you want to do any distressing or anything on it.
I am. I'm going to distress it a little bit. And you also need
chalk paint wax. This is the Sloan brand we had left over from doing the cabinets. This tin looks small, but actually goes a long way. So there's plenty left in here, so we're going to use it on there. Chalk paint wax.
You could also, Behr makes one as well, right?
Yes. We just chose to use the Sloan because we already had it.
What kind of brush do we apply this with?
We'll use a similar brush to this. It's just a natural bristle brush.
Low Jest is the brand. This is the wax brush that you use. It's very clean. This is a brand new one, isn't it?
I think I've actually washed that one. So.
Okay, so you put on the wax with this, and the wax that we have is clear. It also comes in some colors like black, and so if you're looking for a darker type of a look, you can try that as well. So now it's time to get it cleaned up so I can start painting. That's the cool thing about chalk paint is you don't have to sand it down or strip it first. You just can clean it and put it on. So let's get cleaning. All right, I got my paint pants on, and now it's time to get started. Tommy has advised me to start with the top. So we've shaken this can, and it's kind of thick, I can see. I've got my brush, and I'm gonna brush on the top coat going in one direction. This is in a animal-free zone, so that's good to keep this hair free. Make sure your first coat goes on nice and thin. I'm also making sure to paint going all in one direction. This does dry fast, so you need to work fast. Now that I have the top painted, now I'm gonna open up the lid so I can make sure that I get all the way up to the top of this, and I will be leaving the back of this unpainted. Anywhere there's any details, I'm just taking the brush and dabbing that area to make sure the paint reaches that little dent or scratch. So this is coat number one. The coat number one kind of serves as a primer, so it doesn't look very good, but it will. We're just going to coat it probably about 2 more times. This has a 2-hour dry time, so I'm gonna let this dry for about 2 hours and then come up and put coat number 2 on it. So my brush doesn't dry out while I'm waiting to put on the second coat. I'm going to put this into a plastic bag, seal it up, and then put it in the refrigerator away from the food to ensure that it doesn't dry out and so I don't have to rinse it in between each coat. So coat number 1 is finished, and now it's time for coat number 2. I'm going to put on coat number 2 the same as I put on coat number 1, a very thin coat going in one direction, making sure that I get rid of all drips as I paint. So now I have 3 coats on this chest and I'm not super happy with the results. I do know that Behr chalk paint is a good paint, and I also know that any type of white paint, when you're painting it on a dark surface, is going to take multiple coats. However, this piece of furniture in general is probably going to need about 2 to 3 more coats. And because I've used the Sloan chalk paint before, and I know it's a little bit thicker, I'm going to switch over to using this. I purchased old white Sloan chalk paint from the Gather store in Louisville, Kentucky. It's available on their website, and it's also available at other retailers in different cities. And I'm going to put 1 to 2 coats over the Behr chalk paint. And instead of doing a metal gold leafing, I picked up some of the Sloan gilding wax in bright gold, and I'm going to actually try applying that to this. I'm using a similar brush that I was using with the Behr chalk paint. I purchased a whole set of these on Amazon. So I'm gonna try some different brushes until I figure out which one I like best. I'm applying this Sloan paint the exact same way that I applied the Behr, just a little bit at a time, going back and forth in one direction and making sure that there are no drips. This color that I'm using of the Sloan paint has a little tint of yellow to it, so it's slightly different than the Behr chalk paint, but I really like it. And I can also see that it's already going on a little bit thicker, and I really like how it's turning out. Now my paint is dry, and I have about 3 coats of the Behr chalk paint, and I topped that with 2 coats of the Sloan chalk paint, and I absolutely love how it's looking so far. Now before I apply the wax, I'm going to take a sanding block, and I'm gonna sand away some of the areas to make this kind of look distressed. You will need a mask for this because it gets kind of dusty. I'm just mostly gonna work to distress anywhere where there's some edges, probably some in here, and some down here, and maybe a little bit around the edges of the top. Just distress as much as you want to get the kind of look you're going for. Here's an up close shot of it. All I'm doing is finding where there's a ridge and just pressing with the sanding block until just a little bit of the wood starts to poke through. Using this technique can actually be used over your entire piece of furniture to kind of give you more of a smooth finish. Now I've distressed my chest as much as I want, and now I'm going to get rid of the dust so I can start waxing. To get rid of the dust, I'm going to use a vacuum and a damp lint-free cloth. Now to seal this paint and to make this piece of furniture a little bit more durable and waterproof, I'm going to apply Annie Sloan chalk paint wax in the color clear. Annie Sloan makes a brush like this, but I just purchased mine off of Amazon. It's just a thick boar bristle brush. Now here's how you apply the wax. You just take your brush, dip it in the wax, kind of swirl it around a little bit. Start in a small area to test first. I've already applied some to right here, and you just brush it on. I do recommend wearing a mask for this because this does have a smell to it, and being in a ventilated area. And you brush it on, you kind of buff it, make sure it gets into that paint, and you can kind of see it. If you have any excess wax buildup, just use a lint-free rag to wipe it away. I'm going to apply this wax to this entire piece of furniture, let it dry for about 24 hours, and then come back tomorrow and buff it a little bit with a lint-free rag to give it a little bit of a sheen. If you get any hairs in there, make sure you get them out before the wax dries. To get out any dust particles or hairs that may be floating through the air, because that happens, I'm going to use these jewelry tweezers. They have these really pointy ends, and I've noticed a couple of hairs, which are probably from my dogs, and I'm going to go and get those out before the wax dries. While the wax dries, I'm going to apply some of the gilding wax in bright gold. I'm just using a paint tray and an old paintbrush that I can throw away when I'm done, as well as a lint-free rag to wipe away any that I get on and decide that I don't really want. I'm only applying this in some of the areas where I want the trim to pop out. So I'm gonna put a little bit in the tray, and then I just dip the brush into the gilding wax and lightly brush on. And if I get anywhere I don't absolutely love the amount, I can just wrap my finger into this rag and just kind of wipe it away. Just to show you this up close, here's what you do. Dip a brush or a rag into the gilding wax, and then just brush it where you want it. It really makes that details pop. But you don't have to add this if you don't want. Now we're in the final stage of the project, which is buffing it to remove the excess wax and to give it a little shine. So I have picked up my lint-free rag, and I've already done the whole thing, but I'll show you the process anyway. You just take your rag and go like this, wipe it, put a little bit of pressure on your hand, and what you'll notice is the excess wax will start to come off, and your project will start to get a little sheen to it. You'll also notice when you feel it, it'll feel nice and clean, like there's no more wax on it. When you get to the buffing part, just make sure you buff every single piece that you waxed, as well as open the lid if you waxed that inner rim. So my whole project is done, and I absolutely love it. I know my great-grandmother would really be proud of how I've taken her old chest and made it new again. As my mom said, I gave it a new life. If you have any questions about this project, please leave it in the comments section below. If you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, do so now. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!
Visit Carolyn'sBloomingCreations.com.